Well guys, this is Dr. Shah, and today we are going to start chapter number 5 of Microeconomic Analysis by Hal R. Varian. So let's start chapter number 5, that is the cost function. So first of all, let us discuss what do we mean by the cost function. Cost function can be defined as the minimum cost which can produce a given level of output given the prices of the factor input constant. So it measures the minimum cost of producing a given level of output. Prices of the factor input remains constant. So what the cost function do is it summarizes the information about the technological choices available to a firm. To understand the structure of the cost function, let us discuss various concepts of the cost of the firm. So we are starting from the average and marginal cost of the firm, starting from this. To understand the concept of the average and marginal cost mathematically, let us express the cost function as the value of the conditional factor demand. So why this is value? Because this is a vector of factor prices, and this is the conditional factor demand function. So this is the amount of factor input, and this is the respective price factor. So if we multiply the amount of factor input by its respective prices, we get the total cost of the firm. But what should we note is this is the conditional factor demand. So it means that this is the cost minimizing bundle of factor inputs, and this is the respective price factor. Now, as we know that in the short run, some factor input are fixed and some are variable. So let us xf represents the vector of fixed inputs, right? And xv represents the vector of the variable factor input, and this is the price factor of the factor input, which consists of the price factor of the variable factor and price factor of the fixed input to produce a given level of output. In the short run, the conditional factor demand function of the variable input also depends upon the fixed factor input, because this is an additional restriction. You have to adjust the variable factor input subject to the fixed factor input so as to minimize the cost. So that's why the conditional factor demand function of the variable input depends upon the fixed input as well. So the cost function would be such that this is the variable cost, right? This is the value of the variable cost in the short run, and this is the value of the fixed cost, because again this is the price factor of factor input, and this is the conditional factor demand function of the variable input in the short run, right? And this is the fixed cost. So the sum of the short run variable cost and fixed cost, we get the total cost function. So if the total cost function is given something like this, that is the sum of the variable cost and the fixed cost, the average cost can be calculated as total cost to be divided by the units of output, right? Short run average variable cost is equal to total variable cost, which is this portion, divided by output level, and short run average fixed cost is equal to fixed cost divided by output level. Similarly, if we are interested in the short run marginal cost, we take the derivative of the total cost function with respect to output, so we get slope of the total cost function, which is also known as marginal cost function. Now let us discuss the long run cost functions. Now, as we know that the long run is a time period in which you can adjust, you can optimize any factor input. So if xf is the function of w and y is the conditional factor demand function for the fixed factor input. This is conditional demand function for the fixed input because in the long run we can adjust it as well. We can optimize it, right? So variable cost can be the conditional factor demand function for the variable input can be represented by variable input is the function of the input prices, output, and fixed input, which depends upon the price of the fixed input and output level. So we have replaced the vector of the fixed input by the vector of the conditional factor demand function of the fixed factor input. So the long run cost function can be reported as, this is the variable cost plus fixed cost, but here the fixed cost, but the fixed costs are optimized as well. So the total cost function is reported, or it can be represented by this functional form. Cost is the function of the input prices, output, and optimize fixed input optimized. So if you want to calculate the long run average cost, total cost is divided by the units of output, right? And if you want to calculate marginal cost in the long run, you take the derivative of the long run cost function with respect to output. What is important to note that long run average cost is equal to long run average variable cost. This is so because there is no concept of factor input in the long run.